Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jim Kirsten from Iowa Central. We're having our next Eggs and Issues this evening. Sorry we're delayed. We had some technical sound issues that we got dealt with, and where everything's working fine now. So on behalf of the Growth Alliance of Greater Fort Dodge and our local legislators, we're happy to have this forum. Remember, you can still email your questions to Jill at the Greater Fort Dodge Growth Alliance during this hearing. Right now we've had only a few questions submitted, so please submit questions by email to Jill. So with that, we're going to start off with opening comments with our legislators. I think we'll start off with Representative Meyer, go down the table, and then we're going to allow the members to answer questions that are submitted, and then we're going to give them additional time if more questions don't come in to talk about issues of importance to them. So with that, Representative Meyer, thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me again. We've been super busy in the Human Resources Committee. Next week is funnel week, so we are getting all of our subcommittee and committee work done. We've got some very good healthcare access bills coming through. So I think I told you guys before, my main priority on human resources is access to healthcare, and we're addressing that several different ways. In the past couple weeks on the floor, we've passed some healthcare provider training bills. We've passed the 75% University of Iowa, your taxpayer-funded university. 75% of the students accepted to medical and dental school have to be Iowa residents or have a connection with undergraduate training. We know that when we train Iowa students in Iowa, they have a tendency to stay here. And you as citizens should have the right to be trained by the physicians your tax dollars are paying to train. We also passed a residency bill. Again, residency is post-medical school. We want to make sure that those students at least get every student that's has an Iowa connection gets an interview for an Iowa medical residency. Another bill that we're working on that I've been focused on for the past few weeks, gathering a lot of information, is medical malpractice reform. We are gaining support for that in the House. What medical malpractice reform does is, it limits the non-economic damages in a medical malpractice case to $1 million. The states that surround us, our caps are at $250,000. Their caps are at $250,000 to $750,000. Iowa is an outlier. We don't have a cap. Number one, we're attracting out-of-state lawyers for high jury verdicts. Our medical malpractice insurance compared to our surrounding states is at least 46% higher than surrounding states. I'm sorry, 51% higher than surrounding states. On the low end, it's 28% in South Dakota. If we're going to attract doctors to our state, this is one of the things that is holding that back. What this bill does not do, it does not cap economic damages. So if you've any economic damages based on loss of income, you lose your husband and or wife, and their earning potential is $100,000 a year, it does not cap those economic damages that you can prove. It does not cap punitive damages. If you have a physician that is reckless and egregious, for example, if someone is practicing while under the influence of drugs and you are injured by that, that is unlimited. What this does is it brings down the pain and suffering, which is inquantifiable. It is a good bill for Iowa. It is a good bill to keep our healthcare costs and basically keep our healthcare system intact. So that's one thing I've been working on, and I'll have much more on that to come in the next few weeks. Childcare, we have passed all of our childcare bills on the House and sent them over to the Senate, and they're already considering them. And then there
Okay.
are some other less technical bills, lesser bills than that, but still important. For instance, in committee last week, we ran a bill that, believe it or not, when a woman has to have a medical hysterectomy, in some cases she's had to get her husband's permission because it does affect future family. What we said in this is the woman can make the decision. And usually, if you have a good family relationship, your husband and you're on the same page, you want to treat, you want to make sure that those conditions are treated. But sometimes in an abusive relationship or in a controlling relationship, the husband can say no. And actually, the hospital some hospitals were taking that into consideration. So what we've done with this bill is just bring healthcare into the 21st century. So I'll stop there. And
Thank you. Senator Kreinbrecher.
Yes, thank you again to the Growth Alliance and Iowa Central for providing a facility for us to have our eggs and issues in today or this evening. I think this forum hopefully will allow some people to listen that weren't able to listen maybe during the day. I think we're hoping fairly soon we can get back to face-to-face, and maybe we can go back to Saturday mornings again as far as that's concerned. But just speaking a little bit about the COVID situation, I think Ann and I were talking about a little bit earlier. Iowa, as you can tell, is open for business. The governor's made that very, very clear. Since we've pretty much taken away a lot of the state mandates as far as shutting the state down, our infections rate as well as our death rates have been plummeting. And I think that's a good thing. Unemployment-wise, there's a good indicator that we were at the high of the COVID crisis. We were at a high of 11% unemployment, and now we're back almost a little bit below 3%. And I think at the lowest ever, we were at 2%. So we're kind of approaching low unemployment rates again, which is good for our community colleges, that we need to train our workers and get our workers out there and retrain people for higher paying jobs. So I think that's interesting as well. And like Ann and I had said, and I didn't really talk to Jesse about this, but it's kind of interesting because it seems like all the negative is always reported, but the positive stuff isn't reported. And it's just too bad that we don't spend more time on the positives that are happening in our communities and in our state. Also, Ann was talking about, or Representative Meyer was talking about the funnel week. And what funnel week means, the first funnel is that in the House and the Senate, those bills have to be through committee by the end of next week, I think, is the funnel, first funnel. So if they're not through the committee by the end of next week, then they are ineligible to become a bill unless they take a shape in another omnibus bill of some type. They're slipped in somewhere that they normally don't go. So everybody, all the chairs of each one of the different areas are trying to get their most important bills through as quick as possible. And I think that's one of the things you've noticed from the Senate and the House is that we've been working so fast because we don't know what's going to happen. Last year, we were kind of taking our time and had a normal session. All of a sudden, COVID happened, and a lot of things that we really wanted to get done last year were not able to be done because we didn't move quick enough because we thought we had a longer period of time. And this year, I think we've come to the realization that we can't bank on time always being there, so we have to get things done a little bit quicker. So it's an interesting year. It's fun because things are moving very quickly, and we have the Revenue Estimating Conference, who is a group of nonpartisan people that kind of estimate how much revenue the state of Iowa is going to be getting in for the next fiscal year. The last meeting's coming up, I think, on the 19th of March. So if that number is the same or higher than the December 15th number, we will be using the December 15th number to do our budget for the next fiscal year. If it's lower, what they feel is going to be our revenue coming in, we will be using that lower number on March 19th. But I think things look pretty positive, and like I've said before, I've just been totally surprised that revenues in the state of Iowa are so strong because of the COVID. A lot of people weren't working. But at the same point, we've got a lot of stimulus money that came into our state that people spent that money on things which helped sales tax and other things. So in a way, I'm surprised, but in another way, we've had enough money into our state that I'm not totally surprised that we don't have good numbers, which we are anticipating good numbers coming in. So other than that, I think I'll turn it over back to Jim, and I'm sure there'll be some questions, and there's some bills that we can talk about a little bit later too that we've passed the last couple weeks or 4 weeks that I think they're not questions being asked, but I think they're of interest to our constituents and what's going on at the State House. So, Jim, that's all in my comments.
Thank you. Now, Senator Green, would you like to say a few words, and then we'll go to the questions, and then come back with more additional time for you guys to get in a little more in depth with some things you're working on.
Yeah,
so, Senator.
Bet. Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you to the Growth Alliance for doing this. And yeah, this was definitely the busiest week of the year. There's just people say it's like drinking water out of a fire hose, and this week I definitely got a taste of that. There's so much so many different bills from so many different committees that were getting pushed through, and anywhere from there's a barber bill that I'll talk about here in a little bit. The bottle bill we got some more clarity on. We passed through labor a couple really interesting bills, a remote worker grant bill that received bipartisan support. In ag, we had a lot of action with an ag tourism bill, a driver's permit bill, and Tim has a littering bill that was really interesting that gained a lot of support. So just today I was able to sit down and kind of look at the ethanol bill a little bit more that the governor dropped. And it's a really big bill, and it's going to have to change quite a bit in order to pass. But we were able to get it out of committee in order to make it past the funnel week so that we could continue to discuss it. So anyway, I look forward to the questions, and again, thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, we'll go to our first question that was submitted through the Growth Alliance, and Jill. First question says, it has been recently calculated and reported that preschool funding is being reduced by as much as $7 million for the upcoming year. What plans are in place to fill this $7 million gap, knowing that preschool enrollment will probably significantly increase as COVID-19 gets even more under control? Is some type of backfill being proposed or considered?
I'll start with that question because I've answered this question several times through email. The preschool budget, or the preschool allotment, is based on the number of children enrolled in preschool, and the number of children enrolled decreased. It's a per pupil funding appropriation, and that's why the number dropped. It is not a cut to preschool. It is a drop because we've had less people enrolled. When that number goes up, should it go up next year, we will continue that per pupil funding and increase the appropriation if necessary. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes we have to be careful with, throwing, a cut of $7 million in. And I think a lot of people will email us with just a talking point that was emailed to them by an activist group, or maybe the Teachers Association or the superintendent or whoever says, hey, email your legislators. There's a lot more that goes into it than you know. And I think some of what Ann said is probably an explanation that, we would be funding preschools at a higher amount than what they actually need unless that number comes back. So if the number does come back, the money will be there. Also, there's some additional appropriation along with the 2.4% that we passed for K through 12 education. We are kind of working on that with the House right now. I've been involved in some of that negotiation with Representative Height and also Senator Sinclair. They're kind of, with Tom Moore and myself, or Gary Moore and myself, are kind of working through that. And we have a couple kinks to work out there, but there is actually additional funding that we're talking about giving per student, and there's a little disagreement there that we just have to get worked out, but there should be additional money coming. Another thing that I heard within the last couple days, and within this new $1.9 trillion stimulus package that the feds are putting together right now with a lot of other pork in there that I don't think anybody's real excited about, except where the pork's going probably. I think there's going to be additional funds that are be coming to our K through 12 schools there that's going to be helping. And so, maybe it's going to be more advantageous to concentrate more on the next year's budget, with if there's enough of that federal money that's going to come in that makes our schools whole. So, before, a lot of times when I have people email that, I'll say, well, what do you mean we're getting cut? Preschools are getting cut $7 million. What do you mean by that? And they really don't know. All they're doing is just forwarding something that they're told to give us, but they don't really understand how the whole thing works. So I always tell people, make sure you know what you're emailing inside and out before you ask us to consider that as a cut, which it really isn't a cut. And I think it's just behoves me sometimes that people will email stuff with not knowing the whole crux of what the bill or what the so-called cut involves. So that'd be my 2 cents worth that I'll add on that.
Senator Green, you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add to that is this is such a different year, such crazy circumstances that has hit the state, and when you look at a set of numbers, you can kind of twist them any way that you want to fill a talking point. But the reality is that enrollment has dropped so much this year in the state of Iowa due to the circumstances, and with per pupil funding, that's a simple math equation. And so these one-time money allotments or appropriations is what's necessary to properly fund education all the way around. So
thank you. Another question, kind of tied together, is the legislature, particularly this week's had a lot of discussion and some controversy about some legislation introduced related to free speech on college campuses. Where do you guys stand on that, and what will you see happening at the end of the day? And then kind of similarly, there's language bill been introduced related to tech companies, big tech, and their censorship of free speech. So I know they're kind of different, but they're tied together with free speech and technology.
Yeah, there's a couple different problems there, or not problems, but issues there, and I think, I just can't believe that anyone would be against free speech. I mean, and we've been getting some pushback that this bill isn't necessary, or why would we want this bill, and whether you're Republican or Democrat or Independent, I think one of the things that in the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is freedom of speech. So if you feel that you're suppressed in any one of those different parties, no one should be suppressed. And actually in the committee meeting, I did listen to that a little bit, and this bill actually has bipartisan support, which it should have. There should be no view in college, grade school, or middle school, or high school that there is an idea that is suppressed because of a political view or for any other view, whether it's Republican or Democrat. So this should be a very simple issue. We're seeing from both sides speech that's being suppressed in our, and views that are being suppressed in our colleges and high schools and grade schools. And we just feel that it's time that we speak up on that and make the proper penalties, whether it's losing a job or being on probation or losing tenure or whatever it is, that if this is happening, that there is something that happens to the person that's actually suppressing those people's views. And the big tech, I don't think within this election and with what's happening right now, I don't think it could be any more obvious. I mean, you have to be blind not to see that this is so partisan, that all people are asking for is that you're going to get censured for this and you should be censured for this, or you don't censor at all. And I think that's what people are asking for, is that if it's a public forum, there shouldn't be any censoring going, whether it's truth or lie, or has to be, people can say anything they want. And And it doesn't have to be fact checked or anything else because it's a free speech and a free forum. So this is one thing that every single person should agree on. And still, it's being a partisan, it's split out to be a partisan type argument, and it shouldn't be. I mean, that's my take on it.
Senator Green, do you want to add anything to this? Or?
The only thought with the big tech, how many dollars in tax credits do you know? Like,
You mean in the state of Iowa?
Yeah.
It's hundreds of millions.
I thought I heard something like $800 million in tax credits, and so that's due to a complicated tax code. But nevertheless, there's so many different ways that we can put pressure on big tech to avoid those poor practices. You know, in my lifetime, I've seen so many different avenues of how people communicate, and in any other form of communication, people would be so upset. And being censored, or somebody listening in and seeing how they're talking and taking away their free speech, and with Facebook and other social media avenues, this is a widely formed use of communication in our society, and to manipulate that and to suppress speech is just outrageous. And there's tools in the state of Iowa that we can use to put a little pressure on, and I think it's appropriate.
Okay, Representative Meyer, want to add anything?
I will add something. So I'm going to tack on to what Senator Kreinbrink said about issues of free speech at our colleges. In our state, in our House Government Oversight Committee, there was a hearing. It was a very specific incident that happened at University of Iowa with one of the dental students who one of the professors at the dental school expressed his views that were, and this is documented, that were anti-conservative. One of the dental students responded to that, and he responded all, and he was
Censured, basically.
censured for that. He was punished for that. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what your political view is. Neither of those, no one should be treated like that student was treated. And the regents were at the hearing, and they have already made a remediation plan for that. And I wasn't part of that hearing because that's just not my area. But when I met, I meet with University of Iowa almost every other week on different issues, and that is one thing they bring up every time we meet, how they do not support that, how they are working against that. They're very sorry that happened. It does happen. This just happened to be a very starkly documented case of it. Again, no students' views, especially at our taxpayer-funded universities, but not just there, but anywhere. No views, whether they're liberal or conservative, should be squashed at our universities.
Well, I think also that even bleeds down to our elementary students as well as our high school, junior or community colleges. You know, there's just no place for it. It was kind of interesting because I was the first one to drop a bill last year that went through committee, and we were assured, I just called it the political bill, which punished students' grades for having a certain political view. Well, a lot of our students, after I ran that bill, came up to me that were actually in the Capitol and told me instances of when their grades, when their teacher found out what their political view was, whether it was conservative or it was liberal, were affected by that instructor. But they were scared to go to anybody because they were afraid their grade was going to be dropped or lowered because of that. And in college, it's a very competitive atmosphere, especially if you're trying to get into med school or if you're trying to get into a law school. I mean, you need every A that you can get. And a lot of these students all of them that came to me, felt they would be punished to the point where it would affect they're getting into the next level of schooling. But we at the meeting, we were assured by the Regent universities as well as community colleges that this was not happening. Well, just this past summer, we saw the University of Iowa incident. We also had a incident at the Iowa State University that a syllabus said there will be no other views other than what I teach in my class. And we just looked at it and said, okay, there are things happening out here, and before we get this too far, we have to squash it, or we at least have to make the institutions aware that we know what's going on. And a lot of these students are just not reporting it because they're afraid they will be retaliated against. And we have to. This is something we're going to keep driving at. We cannot let this happen. And I've heard of instances happening in our high schools and elementary schools and grade schools. And you know, I just want the parents and students to know that we need to hear about it. And if we hear about it, we will make sure that you're not punished. And we have to work toward getting this corrected, so there aren't political bias taught in our education system.
And this is what's fueling the tenure bill. Where is that at in the House and the Senate?
It hasn't reached the
No,
floor,
the tenure as that probably, and tenure are basically college instructors that have tenure, which means they're pretty much in, you know, as far as opportunity of being let go. They're through a probationary period and they're pretty much in. But I think we're considering on the freedom of speech, the freedom of speech bill, is that if this happens, you know, after corrective measures have been taken, I think the instructor that is guilty of it, if it does happen again, would lose their tenure. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about getting rid of tenure totally within our system, because I think all of us understand how important tenure is to get quality educators into our state and keep them. But if they're going to consistently violate the Freedom of Speech Act, then to me, I would vote for that instructor losing their tenure.
Okay, this is one more education-related question, but you passed the K-12's general state aid. There's also been debate and discussion of legislation that will reduce funding for schools that don't go back face-to-face. Can you give us kind of a snapshot of what that bill intent is, and then how it would be actually implemented? And I don't know who would like to start with that.
Oh, I can start. I'm on the education committee. So basically, it comes down to the Des Moines Public Schools. I mean, Des Moines Public Schools, the superintendent as well as the school board blatantly did not follow the law of the state of Iowa. And because of that reason, we felt as legislators we had to make a statement that if you're gonna blatantly break the law that legislators and the governor have signed into code, that there has to be some type of a punishment for that. And so that's basically where that came from, Jim. And you know, we had no other problems throughout the, I don't know how many school districts there are, 360 or some, you know, and there was one school district that we had a problem with. So basically it's just putting something in place that would punish someone for blatantly not following the code of the state of Iowa, which I would think would be punishable by maybe holding funds back. But I don't know, I don't hear a lot on that bill if it's going to go any further, you know, as far as pulling funds back, but at least we're having the discussion.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got one more question here that was submitted to Jill, and it basically is related to gun rights. And it says, are we considering the law that has been adopted by 17 other states that protects lawful citizens' rights to carry, purchase firearms? And the questioner asked or provided some background comments, one of which was, we are certainly not needing to be regulated to the same degree of scrutiny as sex offenders would be, or be pulled up on a similar background checking databases for owning a legal gun for our own personal protection and the protection of our loved ones. Will this bill have any traction? And they didn't put a bill number or...
I'll go ahead and start with that, because that's actually a House bill that was introduced yesterday, I believe. So it's a Second Amendment omnibus bill. What that means is there's several different parts to it. We have had a discussion on this in our caucus. Yes, that bill does have some traction, and I actually look to see it probably debated on the House floor next week. We agree basically with the question, and yeah, I think we will be running it.
Okay, thank you. Have you had much discussion in the Senate about this topic?
Well, like, I think Dan Dawson dropped it yesterday.
Must be a companion bill, maybe?
Okay, probably.
I think so.
Okay.
So as far as the details of it, I don't know, but I believe it's a constitutional carry bill, which I'm 100% supportive of. And I don't think we're going to be debating next week due to funnel week in the Senate.
So it'll be a week or two.
But so I think in 2 weeks or so, it would be brought up more.
I just want to mention again the constitutional amendment. We talked about it last month a little bit. Just real quickly, we along with the House are passing a constitutional amendment which has to go through 2 different General Assemblies and then is voted on by the voters of the state of Iowa. The reason we're doing it is because the Supreme Court of the U.S. it was brought this constitutional. The Second Amendment was brought in front of the Supreme Court, and there were 4 justices that voted that we didn't have the right to bear arms, and there were 5 that did. So we felt if it's that close, if there are actually some justices that don't read the Second Amendment as having the right to bear arms, then we felt as a state of Iowa we needed to put stricter wording in our Constitution. So we shored up that Second Amendment, and we're going to pass it again in another 2 years, and then it'll go in front of the voters, and they will be able to put a word, 2 words, it's actually strict scrutiny, into our Constitution, which is the highest standard. And so it makes it very, very hard for someone to come and say the Second Amendment does not mean that you're able to bear arms. Okay. And so, but the nice thing, and we've talked about this before, we love constitutional amendments because every voter in the state of Iowa gets to vote on it. Every eligible voter, I guess I should say, gets to vote on it. And it really takes the pressure off of us because it's what the people, they don't have to worry about 151 legislators and a governor making that law for everyone in the state. They actually get to participate.
Thank you. I think Ann wants to follow up.
And I just want to add one more thing to the bill that was introduced yesterday. And I've just gotten one communication on it, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot more. I know that people think, or the talking point is that this is going to eliminate the need for background checks, and it does not. It does not eliminate the need for a background check. In fact, it results in a more complete background check because firearm purchases will go through the federal background check approval before they go through.
Thank you very much. And remember, those that are watching live, you can still email questions in to Jill at GreaterFortDodge Growth Alliance, so please get those questions submitted. With that first few rounds of questions finished, we're going to now dig in a little bit deeper and allow each member to talk about something of interest that they're really engaged with. So I think we'll start off maybe with 5 minutes with Senator Green, and then Tim, and then Ann.
Okay, well, thank you. So yeah, there's quite a few bills I've been had the opportunity to deal with, and this past week, anything from the bottle bill, barber bill, littering bill, election law, so many different topics, and I'll just touch base on a couple of them. One of the fun bills that was bipartisan and flew through committee very fast was the barber bill. And what this did was deregulate and provide more options for people to get their barber's license. Currently in the state of Iowa, there's soon only going to be one barber school. It takes about 2,100 hours to be able to get your license, and it's very expensive. This bill would allow a current barber that's been doing business for a few years and has an educated or a license to be able to instruct. He can have an apprenticeship program that allows somebody to get paid and get their license at the same time. So I was really excited about that. It's going to provide instant opportunity. This week we got some more clarity on the bottle bill. I believe in the Senate we're going to coalesce behind a 5-cent bill that creates transparency within the program, and all the unredeemed nickels or the unredeemed can money. comes back to the state, comes back to the taxpayer. And that's why we believe this is the best bill. It's the best bill for the taxpayers, and again, creates transparency. Right now, with that unredeemed nickel money, it's going to the distributors. It's estimated anywhere from $30 million to $90 million, and that's your taxpayer money. So we'll see how far it gets, but I see a lot of opportunity with that bill. Being as I only have 5 minutes here, I'll talk a little bit about the ethanol bill. This is a really big bill that the governor dropped, and we did pass it out of committee, but it's going to have to have a lot of changes if it's going to pass. The big problem with this big bill is that the time frames. By 2025, a lot of the things that are needed to improve our infrastructure need to be in place, and that's just not very logical, or this is going to take a while to update our infrastructure. The one thing that I think could get done with the ethanol bill is to raise the standard from E10 to E15. Currently, 98% of our fuel supply is E10, and most of the infrastructure can handle E15 just fine. But the goal of this bill is to future-proof our infrastructure so that we can handle E85 more. And so that's what's going to kind of slow this bill up a little bit. Within this bill, there's a grant program that allows up to $50,000 of a cost share in putting in some of the infrastructure. Right now, there's over 60 applications for this grant program that are not being processed because there's not enough money. Right now, there's $5 million in this grant program, and if in this bill, it bumps it up to $15 million a year. So that should be sufficient to help retailers out to improve their infrastructure. I'll let Tim talk about his littering bill. That's got a lot of popular support, and it's a common sense bill. Lastly, in the ag category, we have 3 bills that came out pretty quickly. Ag tourism bill. This brings added protections for farmers that bring people out to give a tour on their farm, that if some freak accident happens with an animal or something that's outside their control, it gives them a little more protection and security from frivolous lawsuits. There's also a driver's permit bill, so kids from 14 to 16 can apply for this driver's permit to be able to drive farm to farm within a 50-mile radius. So that's a common sense bill that's reflecting what's happening on the ground. So outside of that, I'll pass it off.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Jesse, I had talked to the same people that he did on the barber bill, and right now you can get an apprenticeship to be a barber only if you're in prison. So I just thought, okay, if we're going to allow that, then let's at least allow the people that are not in prison to have the apprenticeship too. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and kind of, so that'll be an easy sale. My littering bill does not mean you can litter. My littering bill is actually the true definition of how laws are made. And this was brought to me by a constituent. They were angry when they hunt on and fish on public land, that people leave a mess when they leave and leave litter all over. And what this bill does, it went through committee just on Wednesday, I think, and it allows the DNR then to be able to take the license of the people that litter and give them the ability to use that as a tool to stop the littering. They still may be fined. They still are discovered the same way as they were before. It just gives the DNR the ability to take away their hunting, fishing, camping license on public lands. The other thing that I want to talk about a little bit is a bill that I just marvel at. It's the election bill, and we've got a lot of pushback on that. And the funny thing is about this bill is because I think the last 5 years that we've been in the majority in the Senate, this is the 3rd modification we've made to the election, the Iowa election process. And every time that we've made a change to our election, we are told in the same email. I think what happens is the people send the same email that they sent us 5 years ago. It says it's going to suppress the vote. It's racist. It hurts the disabled. Every single thing that they say happens. They use that the last 3 times we've modified the election process in the state of Iowa. Needless to say, every time that we've had an election, we've had record turnouts in 16, 18, and now again in 20. So every time more people have voted. And it's so funny now because actually these same people across the aisle were telling us how bad we were for changing the election bill, but now this time they said our election bill has been perfect. Why are we making a change to it? And it's, you think back, okay, they didn't say that 4 years ago, so every change we've made must have made it better, even though they were telling us we were doing such a bad thing to the election of the state of Iowa. So right now, and before probably 2 years ago, we actually passed the voter ID law, which was supposed to be bad and suppress the vote, which it didn't. Now we're shortening up the day a little bit, and actually our auditors asked for that. So voting day, they don't call it voting months, they call it voting day. We shortened the day to 8 o'clock is when polls will be closed. Also, we shortened the actual mail-in voting, absentee voting, as well as walk-in early voting to 20 days. So you have 20 days, although you can still request your ballot 3 months ahead of time. So you can request your ballot early. And the reason why we did that is 2 things. The longer you stretch out a mail-in ballot, the more opportunity there is for fraud. And so we shortened that for that reason, but we also got contacted at legislators as they saw the debates. There's actually people that called us and wanted to change their vote because they voted 2 months early. Yeah. They saw the debates, they wanted to change their vote, whether it's for the Republican or the Democrat, and in Iowa you can't do that. Once you vote, you're done. So it gets rid of some of the voter remorse that they wanted to change their vote. It shortens up that period of time. So, the things that we did, we also are limiting each county to 1 drop box, and that drop box has to be on video constantly and has to have security. And that's the only thing that these voting ballots can be put into. And also, the vote has to be in by the close of the voting day, which is 8 o'clock. We don't have until the following Tuesday or the following Thursday or Monday, but we still make provisions for overseas ballots for our military and other special arrangements that are due to people that are disabled. Ballot harvesting is no longer legal. So, you know what, right now we have a fair election, but with what's happened in the nation, we see some places that we feel that Iowa needs to tighten up their law a little bit. So we did that. The House did the debate on it just the other night, and I would imagine the governor's probably going to sign it today. And nationally, we will have a bill that will be the standard of voting. And we will find other states that will follow what Iowa has done to make it easy to vote, but hard to cheat. And that's our job, is to make sure legal voters are voting easily, but not able to cheat.
Thank you, Tim.
My favorite
would you like
line
to add
of the-
anything else to the other topics that you have? Oh, you want to follow up?
Well, my favorite line of the week is the worst form of voter suppression is voter fraud.
Oh,
That's my favorite line of the week. So.
that was said today. Interesting. And do you have anything else you'd like to add, or any other topics you want to cover before we adjourn?
Yep, I will go back to one of my favorite topics, mental health. One of the bills that we are running this year is mental health telehealth parity. That means providers will be given the same amount of reimbursement if it's a telehealth visit as it would be an in-person visit. We have found during the pandemic, this is one of the things that have that has addressed mental health immensely. We know that during the pandemic we've had more anxiety, we've had more depression, we've had more substance abuse, and mental health access has been a great way to improve access to services. And I'm going to go back a little bit. It's always nice to see the legislation that you've passed in in the past is actually making a difference. So Senator Kreinbrink and I have been working with the county on mental health changes. So with legislation that we passed last session, we allowed Webster County actually to leave the mental health and disability region they were in. They were in the CSS region, County Social Services, and now we've been able to move to CSIS. With those changes, we have seen in that short amount of time that we went to the new region, I was notified by the county official today, we have saved in Webster County $394,944. The legislation that was passed last session was when Webster County was able to leave the old region, we were able to keep our ending balances. So that helped. There's also talk, and it will be coming up soon, that we have good tentative plans in Webster County to get the access center here in Webster County that we need. So I'm happy that with the legislation that we worked on for the last 2 years, passed last year, is making a difference.
That's big.
So this looks like we might have maybe a property tax refund. So
Okay, I'm not going to go that
So
far.
if any of the supervisors are listening, we could probably put a little pressure on them now.
If not, they'll be calling your cell phone.
Wait, one's already calling, sorry.
Well, I want to thank everybody for listening in today. I think we're going to have maybe just real quick 1 or 2 minute closing comments, and we'll start with you, Senator Green. And then, again, this will be replayed on and on the YouTube page on the Growth Alliance. So please watch again if you can, or share the link so people can watch it in the future. So thank you, and Senator Green. Well,
again, thank you so much for having this. It's important that we touch base and we communicate. We're supposed to be so connected in ways that we've never been before, but due to COVID and due to strange circumstances this past year, I think a lot of society has been disconnected, and so I appreciate the constituents that have reached out and have called when they have a concern, and don't be afraid to reach out. It's a good conversation is always welcome, and so yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kreinbrink?
Yeah, thank you again to the Growth Alliance as well as Iowa Central, Jim, for providing this space here. And I guess my thing is, as we're coming out of COVID now, like Jesse said, like Senator Green said, we just need to get back to going to church and going to restaurants and hugging our kids and hugging our grandkids and doing the things that we love to do and that we should be doing. We want this to be as normal as we possibly can and support each other through that. And like I say, with the vaccines coming out and immunity continuing to happen through people getting the virus, hopefully we take time to look around us and find out really what is important, and get back to paying attention to those things. So thanks again, and I think we're all having fun down there. Actually representing all of you in our districts, and don't hesitate to get a hold of us by phone, email, or text. So thanks again, and thanks for all your support.
Thank you. Ann, would you like to make a closing comment?
Yep, again, thanks Iowa Central, thanks Growth Alliance for hosting. I want to tack on to something Senator Kreinbrink said. You don't always hear this on the news, but Iowa is doing a great job with the vaccination process, especially Webster County. I realize there's so much more demand than we have supply, and I am taking all of your emails and texts and calls to heart as far as the process of the priority of vaccinations. So know that I'm meeting with the Vaccination Commission and Director Garcia every week regarding this. I'd like to say that in Webster County, we are We have several areas where you can get your vaccination if you meet the requirements, and right now, check my Facebook page for those requirements, but in Webster County, 1,726 people have already finished their series of vaccinations. There's a check Webster County Public Health site. You will find out exactly when you can sign up for your appointment and get your vaccination series started. And I hope to be seeing you at one of those clinics, because I am working a few of them and delivering your vaccine. So stay safe. We still need to stay safe, but our numbers across the state are down. Our positivity rate for the past 14 days is 4.1%. In Webster County, it's hovering right around 3%. We are doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you very much, very much. Again, we appreciate everybody listening and watching in today, and we'll be back again next month, and we'll decide at a later date whether we'll do it on a Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. It's all based on the relationships we have with our public health officials. So thank you for coming.